to Nigeria's 2019 elections. We started out this series by setting a bar for the quality of conversations that we need to have to shape the national discourse here in Nigeria as the 2019 elections draw closer. On today's show, we'll find out what the value proposition of one of the presidential candidates is for the elections. Don't forget you can always join the conversation on Twitter. Follow me at Kenneth Igbomo. Use the hashtag Beyond Markets and 2019 elections for 10. Now, the tempo continues to build as we draw closer to the February 2019 elections. We continue our conversation series with the presidential hopefuls. Some have said it will be a very daunting task for anyone who will be running the affairs of Nigeria after the elections next year. Omoyele Sowore, the presidential candidate for the African Action Congress, joins me to share his value position for the country. Thank you so much for the time, Omoyele.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Interesting. Now, first, like you to get a brief comment from you on what you think the task ahead means for this country.
We need a picture that is going to be handled by people who are prepared for not only in Nigeria that is at this time a crisis. You know, we have security challenges, we have massive economic challenges, companies are closing down. I just heard on my way here that Procter & Gamble is closing their factory for about $300 million, and people are losing jobs. Even the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics said yesterday that over 4 million jobs have been lost in the last 1 year. So the task is to get Nigeria back on track and make sure that there's growth, there's inclusiveness, both financially, economically, and politically, that will guarantee this growth, and also ensure that we invest in the people of Nigeria, because even Bill Gates said it, which is something we've been saying since we're in university, that the investment that Nigeria needs to make in the people of Nigeria, especially is a young population of very, very vibrant people. So we need leaders who can make these things happen, and leaders who have determination, who have capacity, leaders who have integrity, and they're living that ability to survive. That's why it is possible, as we see widely in Nigeria, that politicians steal, and then they take part of just a fraction of what is looted out of the country, bribe voters with them, so that whatever awareness the voters have will definitely be destroyed in the election when they are confronted with the decision to shortly after that election is and they understand it. This is the deliberate policy. One is to create ignorance in the country, and that is sustaining poverty and disease in the country. And you just have voters who actually understand what is going on, but they can't do anything about it because they're either depressed or anxious about the future.
Okay, let's move on to you now as a candidate. Basically, I want to get first what your value proposition is, you know, for the 190 million Nigerians who are going to go and vote for the elections next time.
So we're very clear. We must make people secure in this country. So our first priority is security.
Go back to Ken.
And several other priorities have to do with how to get people back to work, jobs for particularly young people. And I think that one is also for what I describe as social security as well, because without people having jobs, having purchasing power, without being able to get up and go to work, get paid and support themselves and their families, and the economic structure of the country, we're wasting our time. We must also get Nigeria back on the side of infrastructure that can support creation of these jobs.
Yeah, but I'm more concerned about the how. How do you plan to make this, you know, first is your value proposition, how do you plan to bring it together?
So, I'll give you an example. For example, for us to get in the game, even on the continent of Africa, we must, increase the output of our electricity, right? From the miserable 5,000 megawatts of electricity we have now, our party, our plan, our manifesto will increase it to 24,000. We want to bring a minimum wage that can increase the purchasing power of workers, right? And what we're looking at is South Africa just did it across 30% of their workers. This is not just federal workers, but in our case, we're going to be responsible for federal workers, and we want to increase their pay from what is now currently 30,000, assuming they do that, to 100,000 naira as minimum wage. This is for federal workers, and we're looking at least 70% of federal workers that the federal government is responsible for
But do you think the economy as it is right now can support such an increase?
Absolutely. Nigerian
Because
economy,
we've seen just the 30,000 naira, we've seen all the debates that have
they
gone
are
back
not
and
paying
forth.
30,000 naira because they are not interested in workers. When it was 18,000 naira, a lot of the governors were not paying. They don't pay. They don't want to pay. They don't want to pay workers because they don't care about workers. But you think about South Africa. South Africa is not increasing the salaries of federal workers. They're increasing across board. Everybody that is employed in South Africa will be paid the minimum wage of 126, the equivalent of 126,800 naira. In Nigeria, we are struggling to pay 30,000 naira. But don't forget, this is the same country where they rebased our economy a few years ago and said our economy was bigger than that of South Africa. If South Africa can afford to do so, why is it that Nigeria is not willing to do so?
So we'll argue that there are structural differences between the two countries, which is what's making it possible.
So where were the structural differences when they were rebasing the economy, and every one of us, including the CNBC, was celebrating it, that the Nigerian economy has now surpassed that of South Africa? Why was this not these variables put into play when that conversation was happening, when we were releasing the news and telling the whole world? Was this some kind of bias? I don't understand. But what we're saying here is that we're looking at the size of the economy and what it will cost us to pay Nigerian workers at the federal level. Now, 100,000 is just $1.5 billion, right? And the Nigerian economy, our national budget is about $35 billion every year. So we are saying that federal workers who are supposed to go to work and make every one of these things happen cannot be paid just a fraction of it. But do not forget that the top echelon of our political operators are getting paid huge amount of allowances, salaries, and emoluments that's almost unconscionable and offensive. So you have a Nigerian senator getting paid more than the salary of the U.S. president. We all know that, right? And nobody is concerned about where we're getting the money from. We have been funding.
So what do you plan to do differently on this?
So what we're going to do is this, right? What is it that we need to be able to pay? We need to increase not our tax base, but the collection rate. The Nigerian nation has the lowest tax collection rate within the sub-Saharan African region. We're supposed to be about 16%. Ghana is about 17%. We are 6 to 7% of collection rate. I'm not talking about introducing new taxes now. We're talking about collecting the ones that are out there, that the low-hanging fruits. And that means that we are able to increase our tax base and income levels from about $30 billion.
But you're not just going to wave a wand and then make it happen. I'd like to know exactly how this is.
That's what we're talking about. Responsible governance. We're talking about a president of Nigeria that is not engaging in corruption or surrounding himself by corrupt cabal who go and cut deals behind their back. They came out, this government, the current Nigerian government, said they recovered over 550 billion, I think it's $550 billion, some ridiculous amount of money from corrupt individuals that have been engaging in corruption in the last 5 years. So you're asking yourself, if you have that much money, why are we not investing? Why do we go to China to borrow? They came out and said, just from the Federal Inland Revenue Service alone, this year, they've made over 4 trillion naira. What is Nigeria's budget? 8 trillion naira. So if the FRS has already solved half of our budget requirements for the year, what are we all over the place begging hand in cap all over the world for? And we found out also through our journalists that they've been making withdrawals from the NLNG dividends. So that's a huge amount of money. But the question is, where are they investing all of this money when all we need to pay workers, for instance, is just $1.5 billion? What we need to give our university professors or invest in our university about 1.3 trillion naira. When we have so much money in circulation and that has been recovered, has been made, and oil has not been static. They came into office last 3 years ago. Oil was selling for about 40 naira per barrel. It climbed up to about 60. It's back to 60 now. How are we accounting for the excess crude amount that has been coming in? So there's a difference between what they want the public to know and what they're doing, and this is why we need a new commander-in-chief in this country. We need someone else
but
who's got...
But I still want to still revolve around what your value proposition is, because on this front, because I really like to know how you plan to solve it. And then what would you say to people who say, well, they believe it's a two-horse race, and when they look at young candidates like yourself who are putting themselves up for office, they might say you might not have a grasp of what it is to run the government?
It's not true. What has happened in my own case is that I have been part of a team of young people, last 29 years, who has been fighting on the side of rights in this country, fighting for human rights. I was part of the pro-democracy group. I was part of young people who, in the 90s, fought against structural adjustment programs, when the whole world was celebrating that structural adjustment programs would save Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. Turned out that it failed. I was part of people who did anti-riot, anti-SAP protests in this country. And a few months ago, the World Bank came out and said their investments, their recommendation regarding investment in the continent of Africa, particularly Nigeria, was a farce and had led to more poverty than should have been the case. So I have a very great understanding of how the economy should have been working. I have a great understanding of how politics could have developed Nigeria economically. I have a great understanding of a political economy that is all-inclusive, and had actually verbalized and fought for it. And I've also lived in societies outside of here, particularly in the US, over the last few years, where I understood clearly that it is investment in people, and that when people are poor, you don't take money away from them, you give them more money. You invest in social security, you invest in social programs to develop education, because eventually when people get educated, they will stand up for their economies. They will develop these economies. Their ideas and knowledge that they gain from the education that they get from their society will be used to prop up that society, or to support it in such a way that that is where the strength of that society will lie. So when people say it's a two-way horse race, or how do you say it is?
Yeah, a
two-horse race. It's part of how we have internalized the political falsity that only two massively corrupt political organizations in Nigeria are capable of, rescuing Nigeria. And Nigeria is going to come back to the same cycle of poverty again, because we know these two leaders of the two major political parties are people who have been tested and have failed. In fact, if there's anything they've done very well, it's failing persistently at the people of Nigeria, the economy of Nigeria. And they have been cited and indicted directly in corrupt activities. And we cannot continue to run a country on the basis on ideas that have expired and have made the country unable to climb out of poverty and continue to be a butt of joke around the world. We cannot continue to do that. We must not do this to ourselves. Particularly, we need to let the media know that it's unfair to Nigerian people to reduce their choices to these two individuals.
All right, I need you to hold that thought. We'll get to this on the second half of the show. I'll be speaking to Omoyele Sowore, who is the presidential candidate for the African Action Congress. We'll continue our conversation after the break. Stay with us. Okay.
Do we need to get in water?
We need to get you water. Since your voice is going.
What's happening?
So I'll still get, because I still want more on your value proposition. I don't think I've gotten what I want from that. And then I'll try and squeeze in your comment from you from INEC on your process. INEC and the process, basically. If you think we're capable of organizing fair elections in Nigeria, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about. Then I want to go specifically into those the issues regarding each sector. So we'll get in there on one of them. I'll try to get as much as possible on each of them, and we can talk on security, which are the economy, security, and corruption.
Yeah.
We will talk about that. I will try to get what your plans are for getting those 5 million jobs. I really want to know what you plan to do differently. And then basically what your candidacy means basically for the youth. How that will. Okay. Because I'm ready when you are.
Okay. Hey, well, go ahead, go ahead. Is recording?
Yeah, please.
Okay, stand by. You have about 10 minutes.
Okay.
We're coming to you in 3, 2, 1, and cue.
Welcome back to Beyond Market. Still with me on today's show is Omoyele Sowore. He's the presidential candidate for the African Actions. You know, are you confident that we can get free and fair elections come 2019?
So let's put it this way: a free and fair election in Nigeria is not dependent on the organizers of the event; it's dependent on the people of Nigeria. That's been our history. If there was any time we had anything close to a free election, it was a time that, or it had been times that people stood up and said, "Look, we want to have an election that is free and fair." It happened during the National Electoral Commission. It was done by Nigerian people. In fact, it shocked the organizers of the event. That was why they didn't know how to respond the next day, because they had expected a different result or outcome from that election. The same thing happened in 2015, just some 3.5 years ago. You know, the expectation was that the election was not going to be free, it wasn't going to be fair, and that it was going to lead to violence. But they were disappointed because the people of Nigeria also stood up at that time and said they wanted a different outcome. Was it completely free? I will be the last person to tell you that it's not. But was it fair? Perhaps that was the reason why it was widely accepted.
So 2019.
2019, it will be up to Nigerian people again to ensure that to take a stand and to ensure that the elections are free and fair. Because if you rely completely on INEC, knowing what INEC is, I think it's your job to help the government with the election. that's primarily my own definition of the job of someone at INEC. But it's we've seen some kind of movement at the highest level of the leadership of INEC that there's probably, consciousness that people want a free and fair election.
Okay.
But what will be free election? Well, we will need a fair election next year.
Okay.
As opposed to
we'll watch
yes.
the process. I
Yes.
think INEC has been doing a
Yeah.
good job so far. But let me get your plans, because I've seen your manifesto. I've seen some of the promises that you put out there so far. 5 million jobs. In Nigeria, trying to get workers to earn 100,000 naira per month. You're trying to build 17 million homes and raise power generation to 24,000 megawatts.
That's correct.
Let's start with job creation.
Yes.
How do you plan to achieve this?
So I'm going to be specific. I'm starting with
Under 8
agriculture, where we
minutes.
plan to start to put in place 1,000 entrepreneurs in every local government in Nigeria.
So an agriculture-led.
That's it's not agriculture, but that's the starting point. I'm using the word agriculture, and that we expect to create 1 million jobs. That is to say, this 1,000 entrepreneurs per local government who look at what they can grow in their own part of the country. It's not necessarily going to be rice everywhere. It could be fish, it could be livestock, but you have enough investment and drive to put in your best and give something back to society. And that will follow, of course, naturally with electricity, where we expect that renewable energy will form a better part of electrical grid in the country. And it makes it easier for us to have mini grids, because right now our national grid is obsolete, because instead of it being driven by technology, it's driven by laws and a constitution that is not exactly responsive to the needs of the Nigerian people. So whatever you grow anywhere now, you must put in the national grid. The national grid is broken, it's obsolete. So a renewable energy-driven electricity growth in the country will mean that we can have smaller grids, so that someone who is growing electricity in Kano through solar can first of all serve Kano, the immediate environment, before this, and they can sell. They can also sell to the government or the national grid. So with that, we're expecting 4,500 megawatts of electricity from solar alone. which would mean that to put the parts together alone and learn how to, distribute, generate, and transmit. We're talking about some 2 million jobs right there. Okay, we go into education. We are planning to hire 200 teachers.
I'll still like to first stick on power because I want us to address some of the issues with power first.
That's fine.
But I just need to answer this as well. We know the key issues with power. One is first is the finance angle to getting this. It's a very costly what you call it. It's very expensive to fund this power project. And secondly, there's the other issue around cost reflective tariffs, which has been one of the issues that have been kind of bedeviling the sector. How do you plan to address this, to raising funding to get the power, the generation to 24,000 megawatts, and also addressing the issue of cost reflective tariffs?
So, if there hadn't been corruption in Nigeria, officially, under a particular government, we spent $16 billion trying to, generate electricity, improve the electrical.
Yeah, but that's the past now. I'm trying to look ahead.
No, I'm just saying that if the money hadn't been filtered away and stolen, we would have probably arrived at the point where we're talking about now. And that is where character comes in for leadership, And when we say we will grow electricity by this number of megawatts, it's not going to be gigawatts of corruption. It's going to be exactly investing and making sure that we get the results every dollar that is invested in that sector. And I'm saying that anything that can pay for itself, and I want to use, the cellular or the mobile telephony system to tell the Nigerian story. Whenever you have services available for Nigerians, they are willing to pay for it. In fact, as we know it now, people are paying for services that are not available to them in the electricity sector. So if I'm in Kano or I'm in Bayelsa and I can grow electricity and people know that they can come to me and buy electricity, they will pay for it, But that is not to lose sight of regulation so that we don't have price gouging here in Nigeria, because that's what is killing the mobile telephony sector, is that, it costs me more money per day to top up my mobile phone here, which I must carry 3 of them, than it costs me a month in the US. Something is wrong with that, and it has to do with regulation and inability to watch over the conduct of these companies. But you can do the same thing in electricity, and what will happen beyond just, creating the electricity and making it available is the kind of businesses it will create around it. Because now everybody can actually get involved in business, or for example, growing, solar power on their roof. If you incentivize it in such a way that they can contribute to a mini grid in the area, and when all of the collections are made, so the revenue generated can be shared among the local investors right there. So you're creating local economies, small businesses for these electrical grids, whereas you allow governments and private investors to also play a part. But I want to answer the question about how do these things pay for themselves. The thing is, how did they pay for it in China? Every other country that's developed in Brazil to now, of course, they created an enabling environment for investors to come in, invest, and you of course reap from the investment. And I can tell you, for 200 million people who are seriously looking for electricity, you come in here, you make your money back, and you make it back fast and in time.
Okay, quickly, I want to get to a very critical part of the conversation as well. It's your blueprint for the economy. What do you want to achieve, and how do you plan to achieve that with the economy?
So, I don't want to talk about the Nigerian economy in isolation of what it needs to grow. That has been the wrong-headed attitude of our leaders or our economists in the past. So you're always talking economy above the people for whom the economy is meant or designed for. And that's why we always bring in blueprints that don't work here, the ones that are driven by Washington, D.C., and all these, blue-collar economists all over the world. But what we're talking about here is that what economy are you creating? Is it the economy for Nigerian people or Wall Street economies? That is where there will be a distinction between me and other candidates who are talking high valuing economic policies.
So the how.
So
How you want to achieve this?
So the
Economic
high
growth.
here is investment in infrastructure, it's investment in power.
But that's going to take a while.
It's not going to take a while.
Are you saying we're going to have quarters of negative growth until those investments?
No, we are not having quarters of negative growth. We are having growth happen as you take the necessary step for the economy to grow. For example, right, you cannot just wait for the time you get GE to come and invest in Nigeria's electricity before you can have electricity. They have just broken it down to you, that you can start by creating these clusters of mini grids around the country that will not only electrify Nigeria very quickly, but in the cities and rural areas, but it will create small businesses, and that is how economy will start to grow. Because even in the US, where we borrow so many of these blueprints from, small businesses are the reasons why they grow. And the fact that banks can give loans to people that are not done through cutthroat interest rates, so that farmers can grow their crops, and the fact that government is interested in creating infrastructure. We, for example, have a desire to also construct roads. In fact, what we say all the time is that we turn Nigeria into a construction site, so that everything that needs to be constructed, housing, schools, hospitals, railways, will be done as we are planning all of this, an all-inclusive economic system. So what most times people want to hear is that, we want to have an economic conference, all the big grammar they talk about economy. I've been through all of that before. I've studied that, I've seen the exposure, and I know that it will not work here because it has not worked for the last 30 years.
Okay. Very quickly,
yes.
Very quickly.
Yes.
People have said things about restructuring and how the country needs to, change from where it is. When you look at do you think we're first running the most effective type of government, and what do you plan to do regards restructuring?
With due respect to anybody that's watching it, I actually entirely don't believe we have a government in this country, honestly. And it's the reason why some of us are thrusting ourselves, forward and stepping on the plate to give Nigerian people a government, right? So any form of governance or government structure you give to the current operators of Nigerian states, they will mess it up. Look, I'll give you an example. If you take the Nigerian government operators today to New York to manage the subway system, it will be shut down in less than 2 weeks. Because they don't understand how governments work. They don't believe in the people. They don't even believe in the governmental structure that is in place. So when people are talking restructuring, well, they're right to question whether we're operating a government at all because there's none. And they're right to say, well, if you cannot have a government that's working for all of us as a superstructure, maybe we need to start breaking it down to levels where government can work. But the question you should ask yourself, of the people who are asking for restructuring, some of them were former governors before. They didn't pay local government staffs. They didn't allow local government elections to hold. Those are areas where governance could have percolated to the basic and the general populace. But they don't allow those things to happen. So restructuring becomes a buzzword for how to take over power through the back door again. That is how we ended up, by the way, in this two-horse race you're talking about. Because one side is saying, well, we're in government now and we're going to try to do our best. And the other side reconfigured itself, and said they want to restructure the country, but they're the same characters who destroyed our future, and they cannot take us who destroyed our past. They cannot take us into the future. We all know that by now.
All right. Thank you so much for your contribution. We've had a very interesting conversation.
Thank you.
And it's good to hear your viewpoints to some of the national issues, and I wish you all the best as you run ahead. And that was Omoyele Sowore, the presidential candidate for the African Action Congress. That's all we have on today's show. As always, you can watch all previous episodes of Beyond Markets on our website at cnbcafrica.com and stay engaged with the hashtag Beyond Markets. Follow me at Kenneth Igbomo and do have a wonderful evening, and thanks for watching.